Greetings and welcome. We are in Junior English, and we now are going to turn to one of the most remarkable Americans of all time. I'm with you on page 104, 105, and we're looking, of course, at the great Benjamin Franklin. Now, go ahead and write your dates down there. What a remarkable life. Do you see it? I hope you've written down his dates. He was born just 6 years into the year 1700, and he dies a decade before 1800. So notice here, this man lives this span of years that is roughly 1700s, right? So he sees the 18th century almost start to finish. Quite remarkable. Of course, you could make the argument that no single person more influential in the building of our American nation than this very, very famous person, Benjamin Franklin. But very often students know the name, but they are unaware of the important contributions that he made. I'm with you now on page 105. Let's look at the little bit of background information first. Following the American Revolution, of course, words like what Patrick Henry spoke moved the American colonialists. They stand up to the British and the redcoats of the English forces. Ultimately, they win the revolution, and then the real work begins. Once the colonialists have become a nation, how will they define what it means to be a nation? You got to have a constitution. Read with me. Following the American Revolution, each of the newly independent states created its own constitution. While Congress was able to pass limited laws, it had no power to tax the states, regulate issues such as trade that were affected by state boundaries. These problems led to the Constitutional Convention, and there's your date. You want to write it down. 1787. Representatives from 12 states, you want to write that down, met to approve a national constitution. At the age of, are you ready for this? 81. Franklin represented Pennsylvania and spoke about this new constitution. Let's hear what he has to say. You want to write down at level 1. Here again is another speech. You want to write down at level 1. What specifically is it that he argues? So write that down. What is his main argument? And then at 2B you want to write down, what are the rhetorical techniques that we learned from earlier with our study of Patrick Henry and the introduction to speech? What are the important rhetorical techniques that Franklin will use? Let's go ahead now and follow the speech. This is Benjamin Franklin at his best, the speech in the convention.
Speech in the Convention by Benjamin Franklin. Mr. President, I confess that I do not entirely approve of this Constitution at present. But, sir, I am not sure I shall never approve it. For, having lived long, I have experienced many instances of being obliged, by better information or fuller consideration, to change my opinions even on important subjects, which I once thought right, but found to be otherwise. It is therefore that the older I grow, the more apt I am to doubt my own judgment of others. Most men, indeed, as well as most sects and religion, think themselves in possession of all truth, and that wherever others differ from them, it is so far error. Though many private persons think almost as highly of their own infallibility as of that of their sect, few express it so naturally as a certain French lady, who in a little dispute with her sister said, "But I meet with nobody but myself that is always in the right. Je ne trouve que moi qui ai toujours raison." In these sentiments, sir, I agree to this Constitution with all its faults, if they are such, because I think a general government necessary for us, and there is no form of government but what may be a blessing to the people if well administered. And I believe, farther, that this is likely to be well administered for a course of years, and can only end in despotism, as other forms have done before it, when the people shall become so corrupted as to need despotic government, being incapable of any other. I doubt, too, whether any other convention we can obtain may be able to make a better constitution. For when you assemble a number of men to have the advantage of their joint wisdom, you'll inevitably assemble with those men all their prejudices, their passions, their errors of opinion, their local interests, and their selfish views. From such an assembly can a perfect production be expected? It therefore astonishes me, sir, to find this system approaching so near to perfection as it does. And I think it will astonish our enemies, who are waiting with confidence to hear that our counsels are confounded like those of the builders of Babel, and that our states are on the point of separation, only to meet hereafter for the purpose of cutting one another's throats. Thus, I consent, sir, to this Constitution, because I expect no better, and because I am not sure that it is not the best. The opinions I have had of its errors, I sacrifice to the public good. I have never whispered a syllable of them abroad. Within these walls they were born, and here they shall die. If every one of us, in returning to our constituents, were to report the objections he has had to it, and endeavor to gain partisans in support of them, we might prevent its being generally received, and thereby lose all the salutary effects and great advantages resulting naturally in our favor among foreign nations, as well as among ourselves, from our real or apparent unanimity. Much of the strength and efficiency of any government in procuring and securing happiness to the people depends on opinion, on the general opinion of the goodness of that government, as well as of the wisdom and integrity of its governors. I hope, therefore, for our own sakes, as a part of the people, and for the sake of our posterity, that we shall act heartily and unanimously in recommending this Constitution, wherever our influence may extend, and turn our future thoughts and endeavors to the means of having it well administered. On the whole, sir, I cannot help expressing a wish that every member of the convention who may still have objections to it would with me on this occasion doubt a little of his own infallibility, and to make manifest our unanimity, put his name to this instrument.
Let's talk real quickly about epistemology. It's a fancy word which simply means what you know. Fundamentally, there are kind of three ways to think about epistemology. Let's work through it really quickly on our whiteboard together. You might want to go ahead and have a pen in front of you now. Let's talk through it. This is the understanding of the views of epistemology, okay? And we're going to look at now how you know something. Write that down. That's your understanding. And I'm going to point out something that's fundamental to understanding the American concept. While I said before in an earlier lecture that Americans are often defined by that term, don't tell me what to do, there's another thing that Americans are defined by, and you see it in this passage, epistemology, what you can know. And you can kind of draw a line in your notes like this. And on the one hand, you can write the term absolute. Okay? Absolute. That is to say, I will tell you what I know, and I am absolutely right about that. I am right, everybody else is wrong. That's one view. Okay? But there's a second view at the very end of the spectrum on its opposite side. This is what we call the relativist position. Relativist position. Okay? The relativist position begins from saying, well, I hear what you're saying about being absolute, but you know what? In the history of the world, lots of people were absolutely sure they were right, and then they flew airplanes into buildings and lots of people died. That's what happens with absolute thinking. And because that's the case, I'm going to take another position that says, I'm a relativist. What does that mean? There is no truth. There is no absolute of any kind. Of course, the problem with being a pure out-and-out relativist is that you're saying the following: I know absolutely there are no absolutes. Think about that. It's what we call the performative contradiction, right? I am absolutely certain that there are no absolutes. To that degree, the relativist position usually falls on its face, which is why oftentimes people will come back to the absolutist position. I'm right and you're wrong. The early founding thinkers, though, like Franklin, wanted to find an epistemological balance between these two. They definitely understood that they were not relativists. They knew that. But they struggled with absolutism because once you know something, you may never doubt your fallibility. What does that word mean? Fallibility means you can fail, you can fall. That's where the word comes from. And so there's a middle ground that we'll call a fallibilist position. Okay? A fallibilist position. And the fallibilist is a person that says the following: I think I'm right, but I could be wrong. I think I'm right, but I could be wrong. The fallibilist says, look, the relativist position makes no sense. It's illogical because of the performative contradiction. To say that there are no absolutes is to assert an absolute, right? So there's a problem. But the absolutist position is a little bit dangerous. Notice here, Franklin is answering the argument, is this a perfect document? And he comes back and he says, no. No, it's not. It's not a perfect document, our Constitution. He will also say, I want us to be careful that we are not too certain of our own absoluteness, epistemologically speaking. In other words, we could be wrong about this. Notice he even references the fact that he's been living for 80 years, right? As he says, the longer I live, the more I'm willing to see multiple sides of an issue. You'll need this in your notes. It's so important to understanding American thought. Americans in their very early stages are at once often very dogmatic, very absolutist, but at the same time very fallibilist in their thinking. In other words, they're willing to entertain the possibility they could be wrong. And notice Franklin does this in a brilliant way in this speech. Ultimately, he will say, we are humans, which means we are not perfect. And because we're not perfect, then, inevitably we're aware that there may be some issues that we're going to have to deal with this Constitution. By the way, on page 107, notice that he will say that in the same way that we're trying to build a nation, we don't want to be confounded like the builders of Babel. Of course, the Tower of Babel, or the Tower of Babel, as it's sometimes said, is a reference to the Bible. So here we have another biblical allusion. Finally, he finishes by making a very interesting argument. He says, we have to be united in this Constitution so that the people of America will have confidence in two things: the Constitution and their representatives. The minute the American people, he says, no longer believe in either of those two things, we will have anarchy. We will have implosion, governmentally speaking. The need for unity is so vital for Franklin, as he realizes you got to believe in your representatives. You got to believe in their integrity. You got to believe in their justice. You got to believe that they're looking out for you. All right, let's finish with the annotation now. Of course, we have all kinds of interesting things we could say at 2b. We're already mentioning, of course, this idea of of allusions that are made. Of course, Franklin is acutely aware as well that he is going to try to convince through language and powerful language. Let's think a little bit about 3a. From your experiences, what is your favorite film about government? What is your favorite film about politics? What is your favorite film about people getting along to achieve a cause? And someone speaking to bring those people together. That might, for example, for you be a great sport film, where the coach stands up and he speaks at halftime or pregame, and he brings all of the players together. The idea of unity is central. What is your favorite song about unity? About everyone somehow working to understand and get along. Finally, to what degree do you appreciate this position of epistemological fallibilism, this idea that I could be wrong? Think about how regularly you want to present your opinion, even though it hasn't been asked. See, the observation of the fallibilist is, I'm happy you have an opinion, but why do you feel the need to always share that opinion? Do you actually believe others should always share your opinions? Don't they have a right to have their opinion? Yeah, but their opinion is wrong. Whoa, wait a minute. To say their opinion is wrong assumes that you know absolutely what's right. I do know absolutely what's right. Really? There's not the possibility you could be wrong? No, I'm not wrong. I know I'm right. How do you know you're right? Because it's what I believe. Well, yeah, but wouldn't you feel just as strongly if you had another opinion? And don't other people have the same right to have a strong opinion that disagrees with yours? The ability to live together requires compromise. The ability to see multiple perspectives and to appreciate those while still holding your own position. How well do you do that with your friends? Are you a person who can see multiple sides? Or are you a person who always feels like you have to be right or wrong? Can you remember a time when you thought you were dead certain right, and then it turned out, whoops, I guess I wasn't right after all, and somebody else was right? Final question, how well do you admit when you're wrong? How well do you admit, I guess I was wrong about that. I thought I was right. I was certain I was right. Now I realize I was wrong. Are you a good loser, in other words? Linguistically speaking, are you a good loser? Because if you're not a good loser, Ben Franklin will suggest to you, well, there's no chance to ever have real unity. You can't get along with people if you're not willing to admit that you were wrong. How good a winner are you linguistically? Aha! I was right. You were wrong. You admit you were wrong. Interesting. Why do they have to admit that they were wrong? Why can't you just simply accept that you were right? What kind of winner and loser are you linguistically? Well, there you go. An introduction to Benjamin Franklin, one of the more remarkable. We'll come back to him possibly later to have more conversations about that American who is so remarkable. Thank you.